Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of ESG's Customer Success Unlocked webinar series. It's a monthly series. We're on a mission to answer that burning question customer success professionals everywhere hate being asked by a customer. I don't have time to do the research. Can you check with your other customers and find out how they do it? Our webinar series is intended to be an opportunity to tackle some very important customer success topics that we believe need additional exploration. Because we're a lot like you, we're tired out, but fired up. We want some depth in the discourse. We want substance without ego. We want to hear from people who have experience doing the things customer success should be doing, people who have ideas, and most importantly, people who have a generosity of spirit and are eager to share their points of view. We at ESG believe that we can mix that cocktail well, then the webinar series can help our audience members nudge the needle of business back home in their jobs. Little housekeeping, tell us in the chat where you're calling in from. We always enjoy seeing that. We'll have around 50 minutes, 45, 50 minutes of conversation, which should leave us ample time to field some questions from the audience. However, if you have burning questions that you really like us to answer, in the meantime, you can pop them into the Q&A window, and I'll keep an eye on that. And if I find the question really appropriate for the moment, I'll bring it in. So let's get started. The topic for today's webinar is communities are at the heart of the human experience. They should be at the heart of customer success too. Joining me in conversation is Jeff Brunsbach, the Director of Corporate Marketing at Higher Logic. I've known Jeff for about 3 years, and he's someone whose work I respect and admire. Maybe you know of Jeff from his regular thought-provoking posts on LinkedIn, or maybe you know him as one of the two J's, the other being Jay Nathan. They are the joined at the hip founders of the wildly popular Gain, Grow, Retain community. I'll qualify that statement by saying I think it's popular because thousands of people like you find value by engaging with it. And value at the end of the day is what customer success is meant to focus on. Or maybe you know Jeff because you've heard of Higher Logic. Let me read to you now how the company describes itself on its website. Higher Logic is an industry leader in cloud-based engagement platforms. Our data-driven approach gives organizations an expanded suite of engagement capabilities, including online communities and marketing automation. From the initial web visit to renewal and ongoing engagement, we help you track and manage interactions along each stage of the digital customer experience. Jeff is based in Charleston, South Carolina, has been in formal customer success roles for at least a decade, is married and is the father to a child of, I think, Jeff, 1 year. Jeff, welcome to the show. Before we get going on the interview, maybe you can briefly share with our audience a bit more about your role at Higher Logic.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Peter. I can't believe it's been 3 years since we've met. I was also just reflecting on, well, I think the first time we met in person, and I think that might have been CS 100 3 years ago, if I remember correctly, which is an awesome conference. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I love doing this. I love the spirit of how you all are trying to bring this. So a little bit about my role. I joined Higher Logic about 3 years ago. I was the Director of Customer Experience first. And so I got to lead initiatives with our customer leaders on initiatives to try and improve our metrics and improve the experience for the customer. So I got to work with our onboarding and implementation team, got to work with our CSM team support, right? We were kind of looking at level 1 dashboards and trying to figure out what initiatives we could do to improve the customer experience, which is super fun. And then last year, I got the opportunity to join the marketing team. I actually had started my career in marketing. I think kind of always have had a natural itch to get back there. And so I got to work on a few brand projects last year. We, at various points in the last 5 to 7 years, have acquired anywhere from about 5 to 7 businesses. So we last year took the time to kind of really stitch those stories together, kind of bring together assets and things. So I got to work on that really fun cross-functional initiative, got to work with the executive team a ton. It was super fun. And then recently got to take on an opportunity to lead our marketing team here around the corporate market. So I get to do everything from demand to brand. So I'm now, on a different seat, but I still get to interact with our customers every single day. I still am very close to our scaled customer success team here at Higher Logic and some of the things that we're working on. So I'm super excited to talk about this topic today, which is near and dear to my heart, around communities, not only because I work for a company that sells communities, but like you mentioned, we founded a community by accident back in 2020 called Gain Grow Attain. So we have about 10,000 members of that. And that's just been a really fun kind of passion project that's now turned into something substantial that I get to work on every day, which is super fun.
Yeah, I remember when you guys started that. And by the way, everybody, if you want to go on their website, and Jay has a blog post up there about the history of Gangrel,
Yeah.
really interesting read. But I remember when you guys started it, I thought, really? You're going to try and get this going? Like,
Another
anyways,
one, you know?
took off like wildfire. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been super fun. So I get to work on that. And then like you mentioned, Higher Logic, you know, we at the heart of what we do is we connect customers to their customers. And so, you know, at the end of the day, it is a community-based product, but I would say, you know, what we love to do is just try and make sure that we can help customers build relationships. So it's been super fun to work on that. You know, I think, again, there's a need for it in where we are right now and just the way that we're trying to engage customers and how kind of technology has found its way into that experience. So that's also super fun for me and something that we get to do every day.
Yeah. And from your LinkedIn posts, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that you have a lot of experience with customer success. And I was looking at your profile the other day, just a bit of research for this webinar. And you've got a pretty rich background, a lot of customer success. But I got to say, I'm kind of like you. I've been all over kind of enterprise. I've been various different groups and stuff. Marketing has always been my favorite. Sorry, customer success. But marketing has always been my favorite organization because it's more fun. There's a lot of storytelling, which I love. That's an aspect of the job I love.
Yeah.
And it's always a huge challenge because you're on the edge, right? You're on the edge of investment, meaning the company usually cuts marketing first. So you're always kind of right there. You're risking your career in a sense being in marketing, but so that's where I find a lot of passion. A lot of people are really into it. So
yeah, that's definitely true. And I think there's more so than ever, I think what you're starting to find though is that customer success and marketing are, you know, butting up next to each other because more and more, I think customer success is realizing that some of the motions that marketing has come to refine over the last number of years are motions that customer success can take advantage of. You know, it kind of goes beyond some of the simple ones, like maybe like a newsletter or like email, you know, marketing, but there's just some of the other ways that they kind of build content or think about audiences and demographics, segmentation. So there's a ton of things that I think, you know, kind of bridge that gap. And so I don't know, recently, I think I changed my profile too. I said, I've straddled the line of marketing and customer success for like my whole career, which has actually been super fun. I get to interact with customers regularly, but then I also, when they're mad, I don't have to interact with them. You know, I can just go back into the marketing side and just say, hey, you know, I can go figure out what to do next. So.
that's funny. Okay. All right, let's get going. I'm going to first question will be, let me just set it up a bit. Community is a very hardworking word. People use it to describe associations, drop-in centers, the collection of employees of a company. They use it to describe a geographical district, like a city. Use it at the national level when they think about people of a country. And it's even used at the international global level when it refers to groupings of countries as the Commonwealth or the European Union. The word is used so much and so broadly that I'm not sure it packs much descriptive punch anymore. So let's start the show with a definition. Here's what the Oxford Dictionary says about community. A feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. Jeff, to me, that definition offers a lot of clarity because it helps me visualize a very positive, supportive, and nurturing environment. Here's your opportunity to persuade me that Higher Logic strategy is aligned with that the company gets that definition. What do you guys do to promote all that goodwill that's packed into that definition?
Yeah, first of all, I love that you, the way that you kind of went through that narrative, right? You think about some of the aspects of what makes community great. And at the heart of it, it's people. It's really this kind of relationship, right? But I would say the thing that I've picked up most here from Higher Logic is, you know, in our mission statement, we connect people, knowledge, and ideas. And I think that's just the powerful piece of, you know, when you think about communities, right? It really is this idea that if we are connecting people in the right way, then kind of knowledge and ideas are naturally going to be shared. They're naturally going to be passed back and forth. And that's how we start to move everything forward, right? That's how we start to get these kind of jumps in what we're doing. And so that's the heart, you know, of what we think about here at Higher Logic. I always like to think in practicality. So when I look at that question, and you kind of say, hey, what do you all do to promote, kind of community and some of the things that you're doing? I like to give some specific examples. So I think the first one is we have a Slack channel that we call Stories Worth Sharing, which I think is probably the first area that we really try and promote what our customers are doing and then what our customer's customer is doing as well. So, that isn't, I mean, that's just an open channel for anybody to share. But what starts to happen, right, is Laura, who's on our marketing team, really goes through that on a weekly basis to then bring out good stories that we can tell through marketing material, whether that's blogs, maybe there's an email series that we're going to do, maybe it's a social post that we can make. She does one every Friday that's called Roundup Fridays, right? So like she tries to go find that, but that is, I would say, in the spirit, like you said, of like, hey, we're trying to connect people and we're trying to hear these stories more often. Doesn't matter where you are in the company, you can share a story in there that you think is really relevant to community and this idea of people, knowledge, and ideas and what's happening. One of the best examples that I can think about and I can give is that there's we have a customer that is in the baby space, and so they were their products are all about cribs and ways for mothers to feel comfortable about their babies, whether it's sleeping, sleep sacks, other things like that, monitors. And one of the things that they did with their community during the breast milk shortage was they actually made a community where they could connect mothers together so that they could actually get milk spread across the country, which was just a fascinating, that wasn't going to increase their revenue business, right? That wasn't but at the same time, it was the heart of what they knew that their mothers needed. And they were able to coordinate that through communities. That was a super fun story for us to think about. So there's that Stories Worth Sharing. We do have an annual event that we do in person. We've started to bring that back. So we have customer awards that we do for that. And those are really focused on the person and some of what they're accomplishing in those communities. We have the social, the Friday roundups and social. And then the other thing is we have communities ourselves, right? We have communities that we're engaging with our customers in every single day. And I think that's kind of how we start to live and breathe. What we talk about is, we're trying to be in there helping them achieve what they're trying to do in their outcomes. And through that, right, we're learning stories, we're picking up things here and there, we're learning best practices, but that's another way that we just try and live kind of that ethos of, sharing people knowledge and ideas.
Very good. Great. I love those examples, Jeff. And I think it's hard. I think it's hard to, nurture a community in a way that keeps moving it in a positive direction. So let's talk about worries a little bit. And the way I want to kind of set this up is that I've got a long background in enterprise software, and at a couple of companies going back almost 20 years, we had communities. And they were pretty successful. I would say that the customers really embraced it and was very, very busy. In particular, though, when I was at Eloqua, it was a vibrant community. Really, really popular with the customers and with the Eloquans. But my observation, looking at other companies, even is I think community sometimes frightens people. And when I say people, I mean senior executives. They fear, let's quote it, like uncontrolled mobs. They fear customers talking with each other and airing their grievances in a public way. Does that sort of fear show up in Higher Logic's interactions with companies? How do you address concerns like that? What kind of guidance do you give to your customer communities? And how can customer communities be places where members can be enabled to be vocal and engaged without sliding into giving the appearances of an uncontrolled mob?
Yeah, I think it does come up. I would say it isn't as pervasive maybe as you think, but it's definitely there as a concern. And so there's a few things that I think about when I think about this question. So the first one is generally when somebody fears something, it's because they haven't experienced it themselves. So the first thing I like to tell folks to do is to go encourage and often, like, I'll say force those team members who have a fear of it to go join a community themselves, right? Go see firsthand what happens in a community, because I think that starts to quell some of the fear. Because what you start to realize is that there might be some of those negative interactions that happen, but you start to see that it's largely outweighed by the positive. And so I think just getting somebody to go experience that, go join your favorite running community, go join a community for your favorite B2B or B2C company, right? But just getting them to go interact and engage in communities, because generally what we see is that somebody might say that if they've actually never been a member of a community or an online community in that way. So like that's the first thing I think about. The second thing is those things in terms of like maybe some of the negative feedback that you might be getting, maybe some of the suggestions that you might be getting from customers that's already happening, whether you put it in your community or it's in another community that already exists, right? It's actually out there already. I like to think of the difference as like, would you rather know about it and have a way to actually promote a good conversation around that feedback, or would you rather kind of stick your head in the sand and still think, oh, it doesn't happen? Meanwhile, that's probably the number one channel right now that is driving sales, right? Is this word of mouth, this kind of dark social, this feedback mechanism that everyone has between each other. So I like to think about that too. Like, and then the third is that if your customers are interacting in this way, then you have a bigger problem, right? If they are kind of bringing this type of feedback and it starts to overwhelm, let's just say your community, right? You have such negative feedback, then you've got a bigger problem than the community itself, which is the product something might be going wrong with the product. Maybe it's the experience that they're having. Maybe it's the, customer teams that they're interacting with, right? But there's something else that's causing them to come air their grievances in that community. And then the last part I like to think about too is, like you said, nurturing, right? Like nurturing is something that you can help coach interactions, right? I would never say like, you don't ever want to censor a community because then, people will start to not trust what's in there and they're not going to be able to feel like they can come communicate things. But you do want to help them understand where do they go when they have certain problems, right? So maybe if somebody comes and puts in how they had a negative experience in the community, this is your perfect opportunity to come respond to it, right? Let's show them how you want to respond as a company to that type of interaction. How are you going to acknowledge that? How are you going to give them, what's the next moment or interaction for them? How are you going to follow up with it? And then how are you going to coach that, into something else? Hey, we have CSAT surveys for that. Or, hey, I'd love for that to be, put into your next NPS so that we can categorize it correctly, or we can get it in the right feedback mechanisms that we have, right? So helping to coach kind of and help them figure out where that type of feedback is known. But I would say largely, this is a fear that after a small number of days, weeks, like it goes away, because you start to realize that by and large, what people come to community for is going back to the definition that you talked about up above. And one of the things I put, or that I kind of called out from that, was like this idea of fellowship, right? Like they want this camaraderie of like, hey, I know that Peter and I are in the same role or similar roles or similar companies. And if I can come and engage with you, that's so valuable for me, because now I've got a sounding board. I can go, look for fresh ideas. I can go see what I can do to help push my company forward, right? And that's generally what people are looking for when they want to go join a community. So I think it's largely going to be something that people don't, have to experience very much of.
Yeah, those are really good descriptions. And I think, wise executives will promote the idea of expanding the community of their customers, because there's an opportunity to kind of harvest a lot of rich information and data. It's, there's one thing about kind of helping to kind of, I don't want to say govern, but channel the conversations in a certain way towards really kind of constructive information that gets shared. But there's an opportunity to, in the background, kind of monitor and observe the way people engage with each other and what are the topics that they're most talking about. There's endless amounts of information that customer success teams can harvest from that to understand better. You said the word experience. I agree with that. Customers experience at an aggregate level.
Yeah.
The way it's being expressed, if everyone's kind of angry, well, that's telling you something.
Yeah.
Maybe not just about the product, but maybe about the services that you're providing and your brand. And so I think instead of shying away from it, shutting down communities, you actually have to kind of like take it very seriously and address it,
Yeah. There's the data piece is becoming probably like one of the largest, kind of mechanisms right now that I think people are leaning into, which is, hey, we're looking for data from our support teams, from our CS teams, right? And now I've got another source where I can look and say, oh, it's really interesting. Peter was looking at articles on our community about how to onboard, in a great way. Awesome. Well, they also, Peter also actually went and looked at conversations in the community about that too. And so now, hey, I can kind of take that as a CS leader, and now I can either send you a campaign, maybe, via email that has some of those resources in it that says, hey, I saw you looking at some of these things, just wanted to follow up with some of this, or maybe in our next meeting, right? Like you said, it becomes a great context builder for what somebody cares about in that time, for you to use as part of that customer journey and that customer story.
Mm-hmm. And very quickly, I'll relate that my kind of hobby in the summer. I built a small cabin in the woods of Ontario, north of Toronto, and it's off grid. And so I built it years ago, and I've installed solar power and everything, so it's very comfortable. But there's a community, you might be amazed, or maybe not. There's a community, huge community of solar power geeks out there. And any question I have, it's amazing. I just have to jump on the forum, ask a question, or just read.
Yeah.
And I understand everything now. I fix things because I learn from the community.
It's so true. We moved into a new house a couple months ago, and I've been looking into more like home automation stuff. And I've like come from the world of like, hey, I got like a Nest product, and that was cool. I could like control the thermostat from my phone. And now it's like, I'm looking at like these setups that these people have, and it's like creating, they're creating customized dashboards and everything. And, they're connecting all sorts of products to like this home device and center that they have. And you're looking, and I mean, again, like you look at this community, and it's like, people are vibrant every single day, talking about this stuff, sharing pictures, telling people how to do X, Y, and Z. So yeah, I'm with you on like, there's very niche communities that you would just be very surprised about, where you're like, wow, I can't believe that, somebody brought people together to talk about that. And it's become, like I'm on this Reddit thread of home automation, and it's like insane just how many people are there engaging every single day about it.
I call it, and we say in business that there's a democratization of data that's going on, but there's a democratization of information, and it's widely kind of demonstrated in communities. There's a question that came in from, and I might get this name wrong, it's either Burum or Borum, her. And what's your recommendation on how to best incentivize community members to engage and participate?
It's a good question. I think there's like this idea, maybe the first hurdle to get over is this idea that 100% of the community is going to come in and engage. It's just not the way that like the law of averages works. So I would generally say, I think we put a study out maybe 2 years ago that we're trying to refresh now, but it's like, in general, there's about 90% of your community members are going to be lurkers. There's going to be 9% who are somewhat contributors kind of on a regular basis. And then there's about 1% that are going to be the most consistent kind of givers. And so I think about that first. So I think just knowing that going in and understanding, okay, I know 90% aren't going to engage. That's fine. We need to make sure and kind of be okay with that, and then figure out, okay, if I throw away not throw away, but if I, move the 90% and say, okay, I'm comfortable with that. Now, how do I really optimize that kind of experience for the 10%, right? How do I really know who they are, make sure that they can come in and contribute, make sure that they can come in and get their questions answered and stuff. And it's not to say the 90% won't come and ask certain questions here or there, but they're going to be very spotty, right? Like the 10% are going to be the people that come back every day, that are answering the questions regularly, that are going to become kind of your community champions. So I like to think about like that law of averages, and then start to think about, okay, maybe there's some gamification we can do. In our Gain Grow Retain community, we just introduced, actually, so it's actually after 3 years, we introduced some leveling, some point system for people to earn and to get up. But I would say really the first thing that we asked of our Gain Grow Retain community that I felt like has carried us a very long way is we had about 40 MVPs/volunteers, and we just brought them in and made them feel like they were building the community alongside of us. And that really helped them stay engaged, stay active, helped us, think about problems of the future, think about how do we answer certain questions. So I would say we then try to just make sure them and bring those people in on a regular cadence. So we would give them some updates every once in a while. We might have a quarterly call where we said, hey, here's some of the community stats, here's some of the new members, here's what we're doing. So we just kind of try to bring them in, because we knew that 10% was really going to help us carry us forward and make sure that, we did have a vibrant community, that it was active, so that when the 90% did come have a question that one time or two times, we knew it was going to be answered quickly. We knew that they would get some sort of thoughtful interaction. So that's one way. And then the second way I would think about that too is just we've started to figure out how can we kind of bridge the gap of like the digital behind the keyboard, but then also like some events, something like this, or something like an in-person event, right? But you got to start to bridge the gap of like helping them make these connections a little bit more real. It can be real, when you're kind of answering questions on a forum or discussion thread. But when I can, go get on a call, and we used to have an office hours call. We still do, actually. It's every Thursday. That used to be anywhere from 50 to 100 people would come on Thursdays, and we would really just split up groups into small groups and have conversations and whatnot. But that's where you start to solidify some of those relationships as well. So that when they come back to the community, then it's like, oh, Peter has a question. I've talked to Peter last week. Like, now I've got this connection to Peter. I really want to go help him. I want to answer that question for him in the community. I want to give, some sort of response. So you start to try and figure out, okay, how can I bridge the gap of kind of what's happening in that digital piece, and then some of these events or some of these ways that we can help them build relationships outside of it too.
So what you guys have been learning at Higher Logic, are you kind of formalizing that as guidance that you're providing for your customers? This is kind of what we see as, or consider as, best practices.
Yeah, we are. So we are we're refreshing a study right now because we have a lot of data, just some of the higher level data from some of our customers, right? So just, hey, can we look at who's engaged and not, and can we kind of understand some of the patterns that we see? And so we're trying to put that into some more best practices that we put out. And I think we do that every other year or so. But yeah, we do take some of these insights and say, okay, how do we help our customers? There's kind of three areas of community that we think about, which is how do we acquire new members, or kind of what's that new membership onboarding type process look like? How do we kind of engage members that we currently have, and then how do we make sure and retain them for a long period of time? And we split out engagement and retain because engagement, I think we think of kind of in those like kind of those moments, right? Okay, can I engage them in the community? Can I engage them in an event? Maybe it's an office hours call. And then retain for us is really like, okay, if we charge something for this community, are they going to pay us, right? Are they going to come back for the next year? But so we think about those three areas, and then we try and give our customers, strategies or kind of sessions around those, right? Okay, hey, you're having a problem with new members, and you're not seeing as many new members join. Let's think about that. What are the strategies? Is it in your onboarding process? Have you had a wave of customers that aren't in the community? Can we go run a campaign to them? The engagement piece, maybe it's about, hey, what types of threads can we start in the community, or what types of kind of series can we introduce that might bring them back and keep them engaged? And then the retain piece is, what are we doing outside of just the community that we can kind of keep them here? Is it other forms of content? Is it event series that we have? So we're trying to help them kind of piece that puzzle together, but those are the three kind of buckets that we try and look at to try and maybe simplify it for them. Yeah,
that's really good information, good detail. I want to circle back on that maybe a little bit later, but I want to bring the conversation up a little bit higher again. So how does the community fit with a company's strategy for strengthening its brand? MIT Sloan published a research study in 2021 called Moving Beyond Trust, Making Customers Trust, Love, and Respect a Brand. And in it, they made the point that some companies excel at enabling, enticing, and enriching their customers' experiences to the point that those customers become so rabidly loyal that they are willing to pay a premium for the product. And assuming that Higher Logic believes that's an attractive outcome for any company, how does the platform set companies up to move in the direction of the 3 E's, as the study referred to it?
I think one of the things that comes to mind for me as you read through that, and I looked at it a little bit more, is I think one of the things that B2B companies have had a challenge with over the last number of years is showing some personality. I think it's been a very, hey, this is business, right? This is B2B. This isn't B2C. That was kind of the early in my career, at least, that was kind of the nomer, right? It was like, hey, this is B2B. We can't be as creative or fun as B2C was basically the underlying point I think that a lot of people were making. And I think that held a lot of brands back, right? Because somebody doesn't love Oracle or Salesforce just because it's a B2B brand. They don't love those things because there hasn't been the personality around it, right? They haven't been able to really latch on to those types of things. They haven't had kind of the interactions with the teams in the ways, that would help foster that as well. So I think about personality as like the thing that you can showcase through community really well. And it really gives the chance for your customer to say, oh, okay, I can go into this community. I can see visually how you design it, right? This isn't your corporate website. This is your community, right? So this should be a little bit more fun, tasteful. This should, still kind of be at the core of what you all think about, stand for, your mission, what you're trying to do, but be designed for the customer and what they want to, get out of that. So I think that's kind of the first thing that I look for that kind of draws somebody in. And then I think the second thing is, your team members encouraging your teams to be in there engaging all the time. I think that's how you start to see these connections really be born, is that you've got these companies and I'll just, there's a couple that come to mind right now, like even just through I'll use LinkedIn as a large community, right? If you think about it that way, but like Gong and Chili Piper and Clary, right? Those are brands to me that that pop up in my feed that I feel connected to right now because they're doing things that go above and beyond just making a post on LinkedIn, right? They're commenting on other people's feeds. They're trying to give you insightful information. Yep. They're trying to show some personality. They've got some videos. They've got some fun creative, right? So there's this whole kind of ecosystem that they've made. And so I think about that quite a bit. And so we try to encourage our customers to do that, right? Whatever level you feel comfortable, because I think some brands feel more comfortable than others, kind of letting loose and have a little bit more personality. But I think that's probably one of the factors that I've seen as kind of like the hidden secret of some of the communities that I feel like are really successful, is that they've kind of nailed that really well with their audience, right? You kind of have to make sure it fits with who you're going after. But for us, at Gain, Grow, Retain, like one of the things that I feel like connected people, and like you said, right, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, is this thing going to get off the ground? Is this thing going to work? I think part of the reason that people got attracted to Gain, Grow, Retain in the early days was it was Jay and I, and we were, 100% ourselves. Like I sent the wrong email like 3 times, and I would immediately send an email afterwards, to whatever it was, 5,000, 7,000 people. That was literally like, holy shit, I just messed up. Here's what I just did wrong. Right. And so those types of things I think are kind of what established that personality and that kind of connection for people, which I think gets back to your point of, kind of respecting and kind of being attached to a brand is kind of that first mechanism. And then the second piece that I think about is consistency, which is the community is really the most consistent thing you could have for your customer experience that really allows somebody to get what they need quickly, but also, again, kind of get back there and have the consistency of interactions. I know what I'm going to get when I go to the community. That becomes consistency, and that kind of drives some of that loyalty and some of that connection. And then the third point that I'll make too real quick is just I follow Matt Dixon a lot, who
me too. Yeah.
Great thought leader, author. He helps develop some of the series, like a challenger methodology and some of these other sales and customer methodologies around there. And one of his that I've just really latched onto is this idea of reducing the effort for a customer. So if you're able to reduce the effort, essentially your customer is going to stay longer. That's one of the things that he has proven out. And so I also think about how the community can serve that, and that again kind of breeds trust. It breeds this idea of like building loyalty to a brand. Is, oh my gosh, they not only helped me in the software, but they helped me in my actual role, my day-to-day role, right? Like they sent me a template for a job description that doesn't matter about what number I press in their tool or system, what workflow I have. Like, oh, that's great. That's really going to help me out. So those are just 3 things that I think about, about kind of building an attachment to a brand like that.
Yeah, you nailed a lot of stuff there, I think. And I want to just say that one thing about the engagement of a company or a brand. I think too many companies, I'd say the vast majority of companies fail at this, which is that they say they're on social, but it's a one-way channel. They don't engage with the community. And LinkedIn's a perfect example of that. But you can look at Twitter or X now it's called, but anything else, Facebook, they pump stuff out and they feel like they're engaging the community, but it's not. It's a one-way voice. They're not really kind of interacting with anybody. They're not supporting anybody in the community. So I think that's a big miss for companies to do. And then the other thing I want to say is that I think companies are at risk if they're not engaging in this thought process around working with communities, because the research on the younger generations, Gen Z, apparently they largely want to be loyal to brands, but only brands that interest them and that they feel are engaging with them and that are fresh. And you can't behave like a conventional 20th century company and expect to attract these new audiences. I think this is going to be a big problem for large companies.
Yeah. And I think you alluded to this just in your response right there, but something maybe I've even glossed over a little bit since we've talked today. But just to reiterate that point too, which is even if you don't own a community, you haven't started a customer community or whatnot, right? There are communities that exist today that your customers are a part of.
Right.
And I would say largely what you need to make sure you're doing is, whether it's in marketing or sales or CS, someone in the company, right, is going into those communities and interacting and engaging. That is, just to your point, that's another way that like your brand gets out there, is that you have people in those spaces. And again, it's not just there to monitor when your brand is mentioned. It's literally, hey, can you go give value in that community? Listen to what they're saying, add value where you can, engage people, try and build relationships, like really just encourage them to say, hey, this is your industry, go engage where you see fit and what you're comfortable with. But if you do that, by and large, it's going to come back in spades for the business. And again, that's just another way that you can, if you're not ready to make the financial investment of building your own community for your customers, you can at least make some of the kind of the time effort with your teams to go into those communities that already exist, because then your customers are also going to see that as well.
Yeah. So, we're kind of touching on like business outcomes in a sense. And I want to ask more specifically, because I think there might be people who are very skeptical still about community and its association with any sort of concrete business outcome. Can you share with us a few specific business outcome examples that community can help to contribute towards?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the long-term ones that I think about, are like helping to drive gross retention or net retention. I think those are definitely there. You can prove those out over time. But again, those are over time, it's long-term. And again, I think people are skeptical when I say that. So maybe thinking about some of the leading metrics that I would look at that you can drive within a community that are really helpful. Reducing support costs is, I would say, one that has been there for a very long time, something that people kind of rely on. But hey, I can, help get tickets answered in the community rather than getting it into my support team. And, that's kind of a win for us. But some others that I think about are knowledge base. So we have, in our community, we've kind of built our knowledge base into that as a connection point. And, now we've got our knowledge base that's flowing in there. And that's another great way that, we can kind of push customers into an experience where they can get something that they need. Product feedback is another one that we think quite a bit about, like, hey, we have kind of a portal that customers can come put ideas in. We now have operational cadences. We look at those things monthly, quarterly. We kind of go back to those ideas. We try and give them updates on what they're doing. User-generated content. So if somebody makes a great thread or great post in the community, now we can go pull that out and hopefully encourage them. Hey, can we use this as a blog, right? Hey, can we get you talking more about this? This is a really great insight, right? But now you start to see those customer champions of yours. It's kind of building that advocacy and loyalty, but you can really start to see their thinking and their methodologies and then try and promote them, right? Like you're trying to build them up as you can. Things like beta testing, you can go find beta testers very easily in communities, right? Like that becomes really beneficial for you as you're starting to roll out certain aspects of the community collaboration around, certain ideas or certain aspects, certain talking points that are in there. There's also like some of the other things like onboarding. There's certain moments across the customer journey that you can really plug into, but those are some of the ones that I call out. And I think even the one that is also just like out there a lot is the data piece that you mentioned, right? Like using that data to power experience kind of behind the scenes, right? Can I push that data into different systems into our marketing automation system or our CRM that are really then going to help us enhance that experience as it goes.
Yeah, those are great. So everyone talks about scaling customer success, and I'm happy to see that the conversation is really moving quickly in that direction in a more serious way. Scale no longer means simply automated emails or a self-serve portal for customers. It's the consensus is it's much larger than that, or needs to be, and include the full suite of objectives of a typical and conventional customer success motion, but in a more scalable way. So scale at that magnitude where you're kind of touching all your community of customers, it has to include all kinds of tools and capabilities for measuring, monitoring, curating, omni-channel engaging, and benchmarking, all that stuff. And here's the kicker: communities have to be a big part of that scaling strategy, because communities are where customers want to live.
Yeah.
It's in our DNA as human beings. Communities have been around for 300,000 years. When you think about it, that's how long humans have existed.
Yeah.
So it's at the heart, community is at the heart of the human experience, hence the title of this webinar. So can you talk to us a little bit more about that? What's your personal philosophy of communities? This sounds really kind of weighty. Personal philosophy of communities and the human condition. Talk to us about how Higher Logic platform equips companies with capabilities, kind of like we talked a lot about nurturing, and I know your company's kind of fortunes are contingent upon the expansion of this concept of communities, but you must believe in it, right? As an individual, part of that mission, right? Maybe you can kind of elaborate a bit more.
Yeah, we actually, there's a section of our website that I got passionate about, and I got to, it's not currently live, it's for a new iteration that we're doing, but it's called Why Community. And it wasn't, the premise of the question or the premise of the section of the website wasn't why digital communities or online communities or how we're using technology, right? It was kind of what's the ethos of community that like naturally pulls people in, right? You think about in the early days how cities were built, right? They were built around town squares. They were built around everyone living in a certain area where then you congregated and you got to see each other, and it was this very communal activity. So yes, I think about that quite a bit. We bring technology to power that type of experience, but it's at the heart of what we all prescribed to be, right? And a lot of it comes back to this sense of belonging, this sense of camaraderie that you're always kind of seeking out. It's something actually too that I think has been missing a little bit since COVID, right? You kind of, now everyone's working from home. You're kind of in your four walls of your home office, and you're largely only leaving right when you really need to. And that's to a grocery store and come back. That's to so like you start thinking about how it's kind of changed a little bit about how we think about it, but I think about how at the heart of it, what people really want is that connection to somebody else, and that's going to power knowledge and ideas. And that whole premise is making sure that we can basically introduce the right person to the right person. And so I think about that as like the most tangible thing I can think about is, can I connect two people together? Because that is basically going to have a network effect of knowledge and ideas that are getting shared between them. Whether it's about business, personal life, experiences, right? It doesn't matter. But if I can make that connection, then like I'm going to get quote unquote, I'm going to get credit for that, like in future states, right? Like, hey, Peter, I introduced you to Jay Nathan. And now, forever, there's going to be this moment where we all think, oh, remember that one time Peter introduced Jay, right? Like it doesn't matter in the scheme of life, but it matters that we were able to help bridge the connection because now you all, have things to talk about and things to share as you go. So I think to me, like it's a fundamental kind of like core value that people want to make connections like this. So we have a section of our website that's coming about why community and how it's kind of manifested since those early days when, people were kind of living around town squares and whatnot. But so what are the new town squares, so to speak? But that to me is like at the heart of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy, the town square, because people gathered to probably gossip a bit. It's really sharing of information, updates, and that sort of thing. So I think if you believe in communities in the business world, you have to be a believer in the widespread positive aspect of knowledge being shared. Not be afraid of that. And so I'm hopeful that I'm really curious about generations. And so I'm hopeful that younger generations are And I think it's being demonstrated on TikTok and everywhere else that they're not afraid of like sharing information. They're not afraid of the widespread kind of the nature of ideas popping up everywhere. And I think that should be a good thing in the business world too.
Yeah, one of the other stories that comes to mind for me too, just about like this premise, and like you said, like how do you do you kind of believe it at its core? So Jay, Nathan, and I were, when we were building our consulting business, Customer Imperative, we kind of had a saying that we put on a sticky note, like on our monitors, which was information should be free, and it was something that kind of carried us through, right? Because it was this idea that hey, we can share a tool or a template or an idea, something, right? We can kind of give that to the community at large. And at the time we were consultants, and people would say, well, why are you giving away like your IP for free? Essentially was like the thing. And we kind of came back and said, that's not the valuable part. The valuable part of our business was us, bringing that knowledge to implement those things. But the IP itself, like everyone should have access to it. Everyone should be able to get to it, right? And that was almost at the heart of how we started Gain Grow Attain too, which was, hey, we should just be sharing these things so that we can kind of pass it forward to the next person, that they can use it, they can make it better, they can improve it, right? That's kind of how almost like open source code works. And you can kind of see that kind of take shape. So that was like another kind of early moment for us in the Gain Grow Attain community that kind of carried us through.
Well, you guys should be proud of that, because I think it's taken off as a concept, that kind of like just willingness to kind of share and not expect everyone to pay for your knowledge all the time, right? So let's move from the metaphysical to the material world now and get really practical. Who should be responsible, or what are some of the roles that you need when thinking about a scaled customer success team that includes community?
So I think the first thing that I think about is, your scale. You can't, at least from what I've seen, you can't just take a CSM that you've had and kind of throw them at this scaled problem and say, hey, you're now the scaled CSM. Yeah. Kind of go figure it out. I think you need to have kind of these measures in place to make sure that you can be successful at it. And so I think about a couple things. Like one is, you're going to need somebody who can organize kind of programs or repeatable things that are going to happen. So I think about a program manager, or somebody who can kind of steer the ship, kind of keep the train running on time, whatever, analogy you want to use. I think about that as like one role to be thinking about. The second is content, whether it's kind of an actual content creator or maybe a CSM that you kind of repurpose into somebody who can build content. But, it's not, we're not just thinking about kind of a 3,000 word blog article anymore. It's like, I need somebody who can understand the customer, use their language really well, and then be able to kind of relate to them in different mediums. So whether that's writing a short form blog, maybe it's a 5-minute video, maybe there's a quick little podcast or audio note that we can kind of create as well. So I just think about content creation, and somehow maybe repurposing a CSM into that role kind of feels natural for them to create that stuff at scale. The third is that community manager, somebody who is kind of in the community day to day, that is, kind of working with the program manager to say, hey, okay, hey, what are the types of things that we want to do regularly to drive engagement? How do we kind of, like you said, kind of get across our customer base? What percentage of our customers are in the community? How do we increase that? But somebody who's doing that on a consistent basis. And then I think the fourth is just that CS ops role. I think that's largely already in teams, right? But like making sure that you have a connection to that CS ops role, so you can bring the data piece into it, like we mentioned earlier, some of the analytics and the data piece that can get passed across systems and tools, I think is pretty important as well. So I think about like those 4 roles. Again, I know it's hard, right? Like people are probably sitting here thinking, well, I just can't add 4 roles to my team, Jeff. That's, not the times that we're in right now, which is very true. But I think you have to get creative and think about, okay, if we think that scaled CS is like an aspect that I'm being, asked upon from the executive team or from the board or whoever, right? Like, hey, we need to get really stringent on how we're, actually using our dollars and what we're doing. Then you got to think about maybe repurposing some roles and trying to figure out how to cover some of those gaps. But I just think I've seen it done before. Somebody just says, hey, we're just going to take we're taking a CSM, and then we're going to change their title to scaled CSM, and then we're going to give them 1,000 more accounts. And then it's like, okay, let's hope they're successful. Maybe we'll give them like a ticket queue, or maybe like they'll send like an email once a month. And I think you got to get deeper than that in order for it to be something that is going to be successful and that all customers can benefit from.
Agreed. And of those roles, would you prioritize one for a company that just wants to get going? I have an idea, but I'm just curious what you think.
So might be a shocker, but I think about the content piece as like something that is like lacking. So I think about starting there just because I think largely it might be, like you said, it might be the easiest one to get momentum on. It's not something that you need. Yes, you need some kind of skills maybe around it, but you don't necessarily need to wait for those. It's really like, hey, if I have a good read on what the customer needs from us right now and like what, a large number of our customers are asking about, then can I go turn that into something that, people want to read or watch or listen to? And so I think like that one is where I think you can get kind of easy momentum and really start from.
Okay. Yeah, you convinced me. I was going to say community manager, but I think you're right. I think getting the content out there will make a bigger difference early on and get community more engaged with each other and with you, I hope.
Yeah. And I think the other thing you could do too is you could kind of take some of that early content that you're building and that could kind of seed the community, right? So you can kind of think about too, like orders of operation. So if I could build some of the content, I can seed the community. And then if I can also like build some of the content and then I get some feedback from customers, those become my early champions for the community as well. So like if I can kind of build the right content in the right ways and get some engagement, then hopefully that, like you said, that would kind of like then start to easily kind of like matriculate itself into a community because you kind of have people pulling you for that stuff.
Yeah, I think people need to understand you don't have to have a full-blown kind of sophisticated platform of management at the outset. I think you have to actually just gotta get moving on it the way we're talking about it.
Yeah.
I think it's intimidating to think you have to have all these roles in place before you actually get going,
Yeah.
So.
And to think too, like you need all this technology in order to go do it too, right? Like we started office hours with a Zoom call, like a Zoom call, and we literally emailed from our own Gmail. It wasn't like a, automated database or anything. So, I mean, definitely like, I think in the early days, I'm always kind of thinking about the MVP of the product and, what's the MVP version of like a community or how can I start? There's another concept that I like, which is like, what's the 1 month version? Like, what's the 1 month idea? What's the 1 week idea? What's the 1 day idea? What's the 1 hour idea? And the idea, the premise behind it is like, okay, what can I boil down into 1 hour that gets me momentum into building whatever it is that I think about at 1 month? But like, we tend to think about big things. I want to build a CAB, a customer advisory board, and when I think about that, it's like, okay, I need to build an in-person experience. I need to invite all these people. We need to find a space. It's going to cost us thousands of dollars, right? Like that's the 1 month idea. If I boiled that back down and said, hey, I'm just going to reach out, the 1 hour version for me is I'm going to reach out to 5 customers
Get them on a call.
and get on a phone call with them. Okay, cool. And then it's like, okay, now I carry that. What's the 1 week idea? So anyways, that's just another premise I like to think about too.
It's a really good methodology. So one more question to close things out. I think I want to kind of just say that this whole conversation about communities feeds for me into the larger kind of concept of customer experience, which I'm really passionate about. And I have a hard time kind of separating the two because I think community shows you in some ways, in many ways, the experience your customers are having and ways that they're presenting of opportunities for you to kind of tweak things based on what you're discovering there. So I had a conversation the other day with a CEO of a startup company, and his company has brought to the market a customer engagement platform that's meant to drive voice to the customer programs at scale. And so I'm happy to see more investments being made in customer engagement tooling, because first, I believe that companies still largely ignore their customers' experiences. And second, I feel our industry is still very primitive in the way it collects feedback and nurtures engagement with respect to B2B. B2C is really destroying B2B in that regard. So a question, can you recommend a book that can help people understand why the future of their company depends on inviting customers to have conversations with each other and with the company versus the company maintaining artificial walls that keep their people and their organizations in a navel-gazing stance? That was a long question.
There was. So I have I have 2 books that I'm looking at that are maybe I'm gonna recommend three. I'm breaking your rule. I'm going three,
Sure.
mainly because I don't. They probably don't answer your question directly, each of those books, but I think there's some tangible pieces. So
Okay.
one is a book by a friend of ours named Damian Halley, and it's called Control Your Customer. And the premise behind his book is just giving CSMs the tools to have really good, meaningful conversations with customers at the right times. And I think it kind of answers some of your question, because some of his frameworks are kind of this idea about like the right person at the right time with the right message. And so I think that kind of alludes to a little bit of this idea of community and kind of what are we saying to whom? And, I think there's some pieces in that people can get. The Jolt Effect is a second one, which is a Matt Dixon book. I mentioned him earlier. Really liked his stuff, but he's got some really good research in the Jolt Effect, which might buck some of the trends around customer experience teams, especially when it comes to some of the experiences that we put on the table today and how they're not measuring up to what our customers really think. And so I think, again, it might just allude to some new thinking. Okay, how do we use community maybe to fuel some of this stuff? So that's the second one. And then the third is really this, I would say this book by Dave Gerhardt called Founder Brand. Dave is somebody you've probably seen on LinkedIn. He's worked at Drift and Privy and some other companies. And he was largely somebody that I followed early on in this like LinkedIn, kind of thought leadership days. And the Founder Brand is just his premise around how getting your executive team members, founders, whoever it might be, but getting them really bought in and invested into telling stories in communities at large really starts to build the attachment to brands. Okay. And like, that's what you're really wanting from your executive teams that isn't happening today. And so I think that one might be the closest to like the nail on the head to your question. But I think there's kind of something to learn in each three of those that I've picked up and kind of use every day.
That's excellent. Thank you for those suggestions. I'm going to take a look at them too. Because I think the untapped resource for companies is really their own employees. To help promote the sense of community. And I'm not saying that every employee should be kind of like measured on their posts on the community or their level of engagement, how often they visit the portal and all that kind of stuff. It's more around the mindset. And I think you just have to have leaders. And we're just talking about customer success. We have to have customer success leaders who truly believe that the voice of the customer isn't necessarily just a survey. It's a lot of things, including community. And there's ways that you can improve your products and services by just paying more attention and being more engaged with your customer community. I don't see any other questions from the audience, so maybe we can just kind of wrap up. Jeff, thank you for your generosity of joining our webinar. Really appreciate it. I think it was a really great conversation. I love this topic. I'd love to have you back at some point in the future. So in the meantime, be well. And audience as well, thank you for attending and your attention. Really appreciate you every month and look forward to the next one. We'll let you know in the next few weeks what August is going to look like.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me. All righty. See y'all soon.